Hello again, I am Blunty, and in today's video I want to dig down on Cyberpunk 2077 Switch 2 port in its own right, because over the past week we've learned more and more very enticing details about it, and have seen published a few more pieces of hands-on gameplay from the invite-only Nintendo preview event. And I want to break down exactly how and why I think the Nintendo Switch 2 port of Cyberpunk 2077 and Phantom Liberty will be and is the very best console version to own. Chat about evidence that the PS4 comparisons to the Switch 2 are short-sighted and poorly informed, how Night City on Switch 2 is going to be the best complementary experience even for high-end PC gamers, and how CDPR have made this version the best possible console option for long-term game preservation, and is simply a pretty neat showcase for the Switch 2's launch in general, and the misinformation that is spreading about the 7-week-old port being demoed at Nintendo's events. So, shall we dive in? I choose shall. Let's start with those PS4 comparisons, because Cyberpunk on Switch 2 makes it super easy to take that idea out behind the shed and make a very loud projectile launching sound in the direction of its figurative skull. From what we've seen now, I think we can now very confidently put to bed this idea that has been floating around since before we even knew what the Switch 2's name was going to be, the idea that the Switch 2 will be no more powerful than a PlayStation 4. That is, now very clearly, not true. And the Switch 2 is in fact significantly more capable than the PS4 ever was on its best day. Rather infamously, the PS4 version of Cyberpunk, at least once past the horrifically disastrous launch apocalypse it had, so terrible that it had to be removed from sale from Sony's own shop, something that has never happened before, or since, I don't think. It ran in dynamic resolution mode, supposedly reaching as high as 900p, but as anyone who actually tested it will tell you, it almost always, in reality, was sitting at 720p, all while targeting 30 FPS. Which once again it had a lot of trouble with consistently holding there and would very frequently go below 30 FPS. Meanwhile, the Switch 2 version also likely uses dynamic resolution, the specifics of which are something we'll have to wait on the launch version to be certain about, but it already beats the PS4 in having a performance mode which targets 40 FPS. We also know that the Switch 2 version is far more capable, as while the PS4 update support ended at version 1.6 and was abandoned as incapable of supporting the Phantom Liberty DLC, the Switch 2 version will be fully up to date to at least 2.0. I don't think we've seen confirmation one way or another yet if it also includes the more recent 2.21 tweaks and the extra bells and whistles and features like dynamic car paints and stuff, but my guess would be yes. But rather more importantly, it has the full DLC of Phantom Liberty included on day one, something the PS4 version was considered incapable of even running, and certainly not worth CDPR's time efforts trying to do so. And considering one of the big under-the-hood changes in recommended specs that happened when 2.0 and Phantom Liberty came along, was the fact the game now required an SSD to run properly, while before then it had officially supported hard drives, like mechanical hard drives. The PS4 storage, of course, was a mechanical hard drive itself, and an especially sluggish and shitty one, in fact. 5400 RPM? Pathetic. While the Switch 1's storage was solid state, it was still the relatively slow eMMC type, and also the game set to support running on the, again, relatively slow microSD XC cards. Meanwhile, Switch 2's storage is now the significantly faster UFS type, which puts it on par with the speeds of like PCIe 3.0 SSDs we see in PC terms, and the newest microSD Express cards also have similar high-speed capabilities equivalent to those PCIe 3.0 SSD speeds. And aside from whatever NVIDIA trickery with DLSS upscaling and whatnot that is likely in play to help high-demand games like Cyberpunk squeeze out more room on the Switch 2 to breathe in, it's this drive speed difference that I think was key in making Cyberpunk 2077 and Phantom Liberty practical within the Switch 2's CPU and GPU capabilities when compared to things like the PS4. So yeah, drawing a flat line of comparison between the Switch 2 and the PS4 I think is a very silly thing to do going forward, and certainly not especially useful in even broad terms. Clearly now, for everyone to see, the Switch 2 is far more capable. There are literally stacks of technology in play to make it far more capable, even if at the rawest silicon level on paper, the GPU is roughly about the same as the GPU in the PS4, which for the record, it just isn't anyway. But even if that was true, everything else on top of that makes it far more capable. So yeah, let's stop with the PS4 comparisons going forward, shall we? Now then, how about my claim that a bunch of new details solidify Cyberpunk 2077 on Switch 2 as, I would consider, the very best console version to own and play, full stop, no question. And yes, I know, I can already hear the PS5 crowd and PlayStation fans in general once more flinch towards their keyboards in a reactionary manner, as they like to do, and as these words fall out of my face hole. But hear me out on this. Even with the obvious visual sacrifices the Switch 2 asks, when in comparison to the PlayStation 5 version, for example, the drop in CPU-heavy things like NPC density, the lower resolution, cutback on shadows, reflections, and other lighting sacrifices, you have to contextualize here. If you wanted the best possible looking version of the game, like if that was something really important to you, you wanted to play the game looking at its very best, and that was one of your major measuring sticks for making a buying decision, you'd get the PC version. Obviously, it is inherently capable of being superior visually and in performance. There's no arguing against that in any sensible way. Consoles are, by their nature, compromises. Sure, the PS5 version has a mode which even enables ray tracing, which is cool, but it is still an extremely limited and reduced form of ray tracing compared to what you can do on PC. So, if it's already a compromise, what's the argument against sacrificing a little more for other huge advantages you get on the Switch 2 version anyway? So what are these advantages I speak of compared to the other already compromised console versions? Well, for a start, we now know that Cyberpunk on Switch 2 has better controls, far better controls, featuring the same basic controller inputs as normal for console or indeed PC, but also featuring native mouse aiming support with the new Joy-Con's clever new mouse mode. And if mouse aiming's just not your jam for whatever reason, it also has motion-assisted aiming. Something despite Sony's controllers having the hardware-capable feature of doing that, the PS5 version of Cyberpunk just doesn't actually support at all. So, control and gameplay is already inherently better on the Switch 2 version and far more flexible and adaptable on the Switch 2 version than any other console can possibly offer you. And for a first-person game, with shooting mechanics in particular, I think that's a deal sealer all on its own. Motion assisting aiming, or even better, mouse aiming, is just superior in every way as an experience for this type of game. Now, of course, there's also the advantage of Nintendo's dual-mode nature, docked and handheld, all in one. Forget PS5's idiotically expensive, purchase-separately game-streaming accessory that's floundering on the market because it was so badly executed, or trying to stream it to your little phone with some sort of awkward floppy snap-on controller. Go Nintendo! Bigger, better screen, purpose-built native controls with mouse and motion aim. Of course, this is not a key feature for everybody, but it's damn nice to have the option for many. I personally don't play handheld very often, but when I do, I very much appreciate it. So here's another now confirmed feature that I was very happy to see, cross saves. Now CDPR have had this feature for a while now on the other versions, and I was really hoping the Switch 2 would get it too, and now we know for sure it does. We even have screenshots of the feature menu which shows it. And this helps seal the deal as the best complementary choice for people like me who main PC gaming, but don't forsake the advantages of console play alongside of it. And I've said this before, and many, many times, since near day one of the original Switch, that it was easily, and I mean easily, the absolute best choice for a PC gaming complementary console. Not only offering up a suite of Nintendo's superb console exclusives, of course, but in games with cross-save and cross-progress and cross-play features and the like, it was an excellent piece of companion hardware for a PC gamer, and by far the console I spent the most time on within the last decade, by thousands and thousands of hours. And nothing about that particular equation is changing with the Switch 2 and its approach. So, sliding seamlessly between Switch 2 and PC on the same save file in Cyberpunk, and other games for that matter, is a very welcome joy also. I do have a handheld gaming PC, and it can run Cyberpunk, the RG ally, and it's gameplay from this that you've been seeing in some of my side-by-sides here. Just on those, by the way, they're quick and dirty side by side using what little direct capture gameplay footage we have from the official trailer alongside a kind of rough match for resolution and frame rate I asked of from my ROG Ally handheld gaming PC. It's tricky to get the PC version to get a close match for the Switch 2 version. It, of course, will be using a very bespoke and specialized and carefully curated and optimized combination of settings, but for the purposes I needed these shots for that other video I made them to service, it was sufficient. But all of that said, I do actually think, and I said this in the other video too, that the Switch 2 version presents a little more pleasantly, aesthetically speaking. It's softer and gentler, but not blurrier. Again, I think the best word for it is it's just a little more pleasant looking, don't you think? And if you're already making compromises for console, or indeed PC handheld, you have to consider the whole experience. And in that respect, I think the Switch 2 version is going to be the best complement to the full-on PC gaming desktop experience, alongside being simply the best choice for console gameplay for this game all up. So let's talk preservation next. Just as I referenced before in the PS4 talk, we now know that in very welcome news, the entirety of the game, including all the DLC expansion, is included on the Switch 2 version, and we know now it is all on the physical cart. No extra downloads, no codes, no separately downloaded DLC or whatever malarkey is going on with some other titles. So for those of you who prefer physical copies, that's an extremely bit of welcome news. The maximum size of a Switch 2 cart, currently standing, is 64 gigabytes. The game on PC, including the Phantom Liberty DLC, stands at fully 170 gigabytes for an install footprint. It's not small. But of course the Switch 2 version will be optimized, and it won't have the need for the high-res 4K texture packs that we use on PC and whatnot, which helps the squeeze, obviously. So now, at least, alongside physical collectors who just like having cartridges, we also have a fully feature-complete, DLC-inclusive console version of the game that is easy to preserve long-term. The PC version, of course, through CDPR's own launcher GOG, is already DRM-free, so the PC side of things, when it comes to game preservation long-term, was already taken care of. So, alongside my own side-by-side experiments and the official trailer footage, here and there I've also been showing you a few clips from the Deck Wizard channel. You'll spot those shots by their logo down there in the bottom right-hand corner. I won't be showing much of this, because I just advise you to go watch their whole video, which I'll of course source in the down below for you there. But just on that, please do know I have cropped it in on the screen and run some stabilization over it, because their raw footage they uploaded was less than ideal. It's softly shaky handheld gameplay, and they didn't really get the screen in focus properly, which, to be fair, I've tried to do before at live events, and it is very, very hard to do reliably in those kind of uncontrolled environments and conditions, and while freehanding a device. So I'm not throwing shade on them for that, I'm just making you aware of it. But yeah, as you can see by the unusually blurry UI elements in particular, those are supposed to be sharp, this is not an ideal recording, and as such shouldn't be judged too harshly about how it looks, but it is at least better than several other options from the event you could look at, so theirs is my recommendation for you to check out. They even flip through all the settings screens for you there, which you might be interested in checking out. But it is important to note here that this footage, and this kind of footage you've seen from other creators probably, that represents right now the only real gameplay we have to reference from anyone, is from those Nintendo events and is a 7-week-old build of the game. However, the wording of a 7-week-old build, which came in answer form from one of the creators asking directly the CDPR representative at the event who was doing the games for people, has confused some people because it is wibbly wording that is a little bit vague in context. It even caught me the first time out I heard it, because people assumed, including the person who got this quote, and they talked about it in their own video, assumed that that meant this represents 7 weeks of work. Like, literally, they started this port 7 weeks ago, and this is what they had at that point. That is, of course, kind of absurd when you stop to think about it. Again, my first reaction was, wow, bloody hell, they did that in 7 weeks? That's pretty amazing. And that's how I reacted to it when I was doing a live react to that original video. But then I stopped to think about it afterwards and I went, oh, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. That's not what they meant. And thankfully, we have an official tweet from the Japanese community manager for CDPR and Cyberpunk that has cleared this up very succinctly. The claim that Cyberpunk 2077 was ported in 7 weeks is a false report. The correct statement is that the ROM being used in the trial sessions currently being held around the world was created 7 weeks ago, and therefore not the final version. So that is much better wording. No room for misinterpretation there. They've been working on this port for far, far longer than 7 weeks. But the port they're specifically showing off was solidified and the creditor ROM for it to be demoed 7 weeks ago. Now the reason it's a near 2-month-old build is because, for events like this, a playable build must be solidified and prepared and tested well in advance to be demoed and played in public, unrestricted, on retail-ready hardware, or at least, pre-production units or whatever, as opposed to the much more up-to-date code they'll be working on right now, as you're listening to this, on their dev kits and stuff in their offices. Don't really do live demos on dev kits. That's not how this works. So preparing it a couple of months in advance gives them the chance to test it properly, make sure it's stable and reliable enough to demo publicly and reliably. So, with all of that cleared up, best console version. Evidence that the PS4 comparisons are short-sighted and poorly informed. Best complementary experience for PC gamers. Best console option for game preservation long-term. And a pretty neat showcase for the Switch 2's launch in general and its specialized features, including its new mouse mode, which no other console can manage. All of the above mean this is a very, very enticing port of a very, very fun game. I'm pretty excited to be able to check it out at launch, in fact. Some of the other footage in this video is from a fresh save file I started just this weekend while streaming over on Twitch, with the intent to test out what kind of build I might want to do this time around when I do come to the Switch 2 playthrough, and to clear out the entirety of the first zone, and to clear out the first chapter of the game, so when the Switch 2 version launches, I have a nice fresh save file to test out all the cross-save stuff with, and indeed to continue a full Switch 2 playthrough on and stream with the whole of the open world ready for exploration and testing and comparisons and whatnot. And not just for the testing of it all and trying out the new Switch 2 control options and whatnot, and not just for the novelty of playing this game on Nintendo's new handheld, but simply because this game just never seems to get less fun no matter how many playthroughs I do. There's always a new way to try a new playthrough, a new build, a new gameplay style to mess around with. I think this will be my 8th full playthrough, probably 9 maybe. It kind of gets a bit wibbly on my second playthrough because that was a bit of a, well, it's a thing. Whatever. It's an epic game. So glad CDPR never gave up on it after that notoriously miserable launch that they had. So thanks to them. Thanks for you for watching all the way through here. I appreciate that very much. Appreciate the patrons who helped me out here on the channel as well. I am Blunty, and we'll catch you next time.
In any case, I don't regret switching my life up the way I did.
Well, that'd be the sweet taste of success, my friend. Hey, call up Dex, let him know we got his toy. Meeting to celebrate at the afterlife. Ahí luego, V.